So Esther 2:16 to all of chapter 3 is tonight, in case you just didn't know. And I won't take the time to review because I think we all probably are right up to where we need to be, and especially if you were able to at least read the passage. We're on the treadmill, we're running, and we're ready to go. So let's start in verse 19. You know, we're coming off the fact that now Esther is the queen. Did you like my slide last week with the Hallelujah chorus? It was hard to top that, so I just warn you right off the bat. We don't have any music tonight on any of the slides, unless, of course, you'd like for me to sing when I switch them, but that might not be good. Anyway, so we have the feast. We talked about the feast that was named for Esther and how it was declared like an empire-wide holiday. And I'll just stand here like this. It was an empire-wide holiday. People, I'm sure by this point, probably really liked the new queen that was chosen because it got them a relief of taxes. It probably got them some extra income into their provinces because the king gave them some money. Probably they got a day off of work. Slaves might have been, let go. It was all good. And then we hit verse 19. Now, verse 19, we're told, now when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Help me. What do you think it means when they're gathered a second time? More of them. Probably so. Now, there are some, when you read, you find, well, perhaps he chose Esther before he had a chance to finish with that run of young women that were in that first house. And that's what this means. But I think when you look at the way that this is actually worded, that doesn't make as much sense as to say, he probably went out and did it again. And the most logical reason that I read for that is during this time, Ahasuerus was not going out doing any kind of conquest. And remember I told you that these concubines that are brought in, a lot of them are the spoils of war, right? So if he were to go out and attack and conquer another area to add to his empire, he would have brought back some more potential wives and concubines. And since he was not doing this at this time, you just needed to keep that harem full. And he actually had people that were employed for that very job, right? We've met Haggai, remember? He was in charge of that first house. And Gaz, is that his name? I had the hardest time with that one. Anyway, he was in charge of that second house. So if that's their jobs, they need women to watch over, right? So probably if the Esther search was a novel idea that those 7 advisors had, they must have thought that it worked really well enough to do it again. How much time has elapsed? We have absolutely no idea. You know me and wanting to follow that timeline. We have no idea. So how long has Esther been queen? We have no idea. I do have a timeline for you tonight, so just to excite you ahead of time. So we see that Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Well, let's look at this a second. The king's gate was either a public meeting place with a common area within the palace, or it was a place where commercial and judicial matters occurred. Most likely, Mordecai had a seat of authority. Most commentaries that I read said Mordecai seemed to, and we'll talk a little bit about it in a couple of verses, seemed to have some authority now. Now, how did he get that? Well, I'd like to think that once Esther got in there, perhaps she had something to do with Mordecai getting a position. Because we're not told before now. When we're introduced to him in chapter 1, nothing is said about Mordecai's job, right? And I would think that perhaps if he had some sort of position, we might have been told that in chapter 1. But for some reason, we're not told that until chapter 3. That's all speculation, though. So please, that's not a hill to die on. All right. So if somebody comes up with something else, it's okay. But I thought that was very logical when it says he's sitting at the king's gate, probably had a seat of authority, because we would use that kind of terminology. Important to know for something that's coming up. Now, verse 20, Esther had not made known her kindred or her people as Mordecai had commanded her. Interesting choice of words. Esther is still not letting anybody know that she's a Jew. But we find out later in this chapter Mordecai didn't obey his own rule, right? We'll talk about that when we get there. But Esther did not let her kindred be known as Mordecai, what's the word? Commanded her. Who is Mordecai commanding?
Queen.
The queen. I thought it was kind of an interesting word choice. Does she have to listen to him at all now? She doesn't. But she does. And I think that tells us a little bit about Esther's character, right? And the respect that she has for Mordecai, who reared her. He doesn't want her to say that she's a Jewess, but she didn't have to listen to him, but she does. I like that. It's just a little thing like that where you can kind of step back, take a look at her and go, well, that's neat, that she still, even with power, even with this queen position that she had and didn't have to listen to him, she still did. So let's keep going. Verse 21. I'm trying not to get hung up in the early verses because I got all kinds of things to tell you as we get going. Verse 21. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigtan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Remember my mantra about read slow and ask questions? So if you were going to read slow and ask some questions, what would be one of the questions that you would ask reading that verse? Why are they mad? Why are they angry? And if you were to look at the original word for became angry, you would find that way back in chapter 1, when Ahasuerus got really mad when Vashti didn't show up, same word. Remember that day how we talked about how that meant like a furious rage? Same word. So for some reason, these two guys are furious. They are in a rage over something. And it doesn't matter how many times you Google it or try to pull it up in a commentary, you can find that many speculations as to why these guys got mad. Nobody knows, and I'm not even going to try to guess or waste the time on telling you what I read. All we need to know is that they were really mad, and they seem to be really mad at the king. Now, who are these guys? We know that they're two eunuchs who guarded the threshold. Literally, let's see, that would be guarded the threshold in KJV is kept the door, which if somebody is stationed at a door to keep the door, what would we kind of probably call these guys? What? Well, doormen or bouncers. More of kept. Let me say this. The kept. Who did somebody say bouncers? You know what? The last time I taught this, that was said too. I thought that was funny. I should have worded the question differently, so that couldn't have been an answer. No, kept means to protect in this sense. So to protect the door, we would call these guys probably security guards, right? Best I can tell, they're security guards. Now somebody speculated, well, maybe Mordecai had the same job that they had, but we're not told that they sat at the king's gate. We're told that they kept the threshold, or however it's worded. So I don't think they had the same job, and that's important as we talk about this. Now, they get mad over something, and in verse 22, in verse 21, they sought to lay hands on the king. Verse 22, and this came to the knowledge of Mordecai. Now, how did it come to the knowledge of Mordecai? Don't know. It doesn't tell us. God's timing. Did he overhear them? Perhaps. Do what?
He was in the gate.
He was in the gate, so it depends on it. Were they talking quietly? I mean, I think if they're going to plan something to kill the king, you're probably not going to be talking really loudly, because that was not looked upon very favorably, as we see how the story pans out. Another speculation, and I thought this was really plausible in light of what we talked about last week, was perhaps if Mordecai indeed had a position of authority, did these two come to him and ask for some inside help? Because back in the day, bribery in these circles was huge. Do you remember last week talking about Ezra chapter 4 and the Samaritans and how they oppressed the Jews that were going back to build the temple? And it mentioned in there, I think I might have glossed over it not too deeply, but they bribed counselors to plead their case. And they said that's back in Shushan the palace. They were probably bribing people to speak ill to the king about these Jews and tell the king, along with the letters that they wrote, that these Jews are up to no good and they're not going to listen to you and they're not going to pay their taxes. They bribed people within the kingdom to speak ill of these Jews. So bribery was a very popular thing. And so, given that, did they come to Mordecai and offer to bribe him so that he could help them pull off the plan? That's interesting. When you look at this, to tell or not to tell. If you look at verse 22, it's up here. Look at it with me. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther. And Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. Now, before we look at the points underneath that, one thing that jumps off the page, or the screen in this case, and this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and who told it to Queen Esther? He had access to the queen. That's one of those, if we had to do a column, did Mordecai have an important job or not? That would go under the column of he probably was important if he had access to the queen to be able to go talk to her. Now that's interesting, and it raises some questions as the story goes on, because later in Esther, when we read about the when Mordecai wants Esther to know why he's mourning, and Esther doesn't know what's going on, he tells her stuff by messenger. And so I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, well, if he can talk to her directly here, why does he do that then? So that might actually come up next week in what we're going to study. If it does, when you read that, see if you can come up with a good answer for that, because I don't actually have one yet, because I actually just thought of that this week. But I'm gonna chew on that a little bit and figure out why he went via messenger later, but obviously he was able to talk directly to her here. So we know that Esther then went to the king in the name of Mordecai, which literally means giving credit to or basing it upon Mordecai's reputation. So obviously Mordecai must have had a pretty trustworthy, reputable reputation. Boy, that wasn't redundant, was it? Anyway, in order for the king to believe that. And then, look, we're told in verse 23, when the affair was investigated, and I can probably guess it wasn't a very long, drawn-out investigation, because matters of the king possibly losing his life were taken quite seriously and dealt with quite swiftly, and found to be so it was true, the men were both hanged on the gallows. And it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Now look back up here. Mordecai could have gotten revenge on behalf of all Jews by letting a Persian king be killed. Remember we talked about the whole Benjaminite thing and how, well no, we're going to talk today about Haman. How Mordecai was of the Benjamin line, so was Esther, and we talked about all of that and the disdain with the half-Jews and whatnot last week. So he could have gotten revenge on behalf of all the Jews by letting a Persian king be killed, and he may have gotten Esther back in his home if the king had been killed. You think about that. Now, flip side of that is sometimes if a king was murdered, so was the queen. All right, so that could have backfired on him. But I want you to just look at these words in blue. Vindication and selfishness. Store those away. They're coming up in just a little bit. So Mordecai could have been vindictive. He could have been selfish. He could have kept this information to himself and changed the whole course of history. Right? But he didn't. He did the right thing because he might not have liked this king. Look what this king did to Esther. He took her away. Of course, she is queen now, but that wasn't a guarantee when he took her. Mordecai could have held that grudge. And this could have been his chance to get back at this guy. And he didn't do it. So keep those two words in mind. Interesting to note, though, 14 years after this happened, Ahasuerus was assassinated. So apparently Mordecai didn't find that one out and saved the day on that one. But 14 years later, he was assassinated, and that's how his reign ended. I didn't write the reference down, but I think it's Ezra 6. This might be a gamble. Look at Ezra 6 with me. Yes. Ezra 6:11. Also, I make a decree that if anyone alters this edict, a beam shall be pulled out of his house, and he shall be impaled on it, and his house shall be made a dunghill. I wanted to share that verse with you. That is my life's verse. No. I don't know that I've ever met anyone that's chosen that as, their life's verse. A beam pulled out of their house, they're impaled on it. That's what we're talking about when we read in verse 23 that when everything was found to be so, the men were hanged on the gallows. Interesting choice of words. We will see the word gallows come up later. Very important for you to understand, along with me, what this means, because it really comes on like a grander scale later when Haman is hung. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But the hanging on the gallows to us, we just think of, some cross beam and, a rope, and they drop somebody off a platform or through a trap door. That's to us what hanging is. That is not to them what hanging is. They would actually, I won't go through the whole thing because it's really horrible, but you end up impaled by a big piece of wood, probably into sharpened, so it makes a good, and then the thing is turned up, a hole is dug, and it's plopped into the ground. So then you are suspended with a big old beam going through you, and of course you eventually will die, but you are there for everyone to see. And one thing I read said actually Darius, who was Ahasuerus' father, impaled 3,000 people at one time and lined the streets of Shushan with them to let everybody know, if you do not do what I tell you to do, this will be you. So I think I would probably straighten up. If I had a questionable thing, whether I was going to obey the king or not, that could probably answer my question. Now, keep in mind that it wouldn't take like a 12-foot beam. I mean, how big are you? If I got just a decent sized thing, as long as it didn't break, I could get it on you and turn you upside down, drop it in a hole in the ground, and you could be suspended 6 inches off the ground, and it would still have the same effect as if I suspended you 20 feet off the ground, right? That comes in a couple of weeks with the lesson. Keep that part in mind, even though that's not a very pleasant thing to talk about. You have to understand that, because then later when we talk about Haman, you can see the extravagant plan that he devised, because we are actually given the dimensions of the gallows that he had built and figured out for Mordecai to be showcased for all to see. But we'll talk about that in a few weeks. That wasn't a very pleasant thing, but it's over. Now, I absolutely love this. I'm over here. At the end of that verse, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. In a quick reading, you read that, okay, great, it was recorded. And then the story just goes on, and you kind of forget that was recorded, and that's the point. And that's the awesomeness of this story and foreshadowing. Because that's foreshadowing, because if you know the story, you know that little line is very important late one night when the king can't sleep. And but I love that, because that's first time through, you'd read that and it really wouldn't ring your bell, but we know what's coming. Now we're going into chapter 3, and we have a timeline. All right. Now, the last timestamp that we have was when Esther was made the queen, and we know that was in the 7th year of his reign. Ring a bell? So we know the book of Esther starts in 483, and that's in his 3rd year. We know, if you look at the red arrow, that in 479, 478, roughly around in there, Esther becomes the queen. Because of that timestamp, we know. Now, our next timestamp actually occurs in the middle of chapter 3. And it's in verse 7, in the 1st month, which is the month Nisan, in the 12th year. Now, we don't have anything between the 7th year, when Esther's made queen, and the 12th year, except like a half a chapter. But you realize that in 2.5 chapters of Esther, we have covered 9 years of time. Kind of cool, right? When you read quickly and you don't stop to kind of figure these things out, remember, everybody seemed a little surprised that the whole book of Esther covered 10 years of time. But it's kind of neat when you think, okay, 9 of that 10 years is in the first 2.5 chapters. The rest of the book happens within that last year of time. And we're not exactly sure, though, when you have, starting in verse 19 and 20, what we just talked about with these 2 that wanted to kill the king. Did that happen closer to year 7? Or did that happen closer to year 12? Don't really know, except the chapter division. Now, I know chapter divisions are not divinely inspired. But I think whoever decided to put chapter 3 right there may have read some of the same people that I read. And Bigtan and Teresh, that whole incident seems to happen a little bit closer. These commentators have their reasons for thinking this. To Esther's coronation. Then we have chapter 3 starting. Life is going on, whatever. And we're told this is the 12th year of his reign. And that's when Haman is promoted and given, his position. And so I like to think that there's probably a couple, 3-year gap maybe in between chapter 2 and chapter 3. You got to fudge a little bit because, like we said, we don't know exactly. But think about the story that we just had with those 2. Put it closer to Esther's coronation for the sake of argument. And let's put Haman closer to the 12-year mark. That's the case. Esther's been queen for, roughly 3-4 years? Right? If she was, 7th year, oh no, longer, 4 to 5 years, right? If this is now the 12th year. So Esther is established in her queenship. Mordecai still has that seat, whatever that might be. Life is normal. This is their normal. That's what we have to keep in mind. Average day, normal days, get up, drink the coffee, go to work, sit in the king's gate, do your job, Mordecai, go home in the afternoon, get up tomorrow, do it the same the very next day. Yeah, that takes care of that timeline. I think that explained that enough all right. So let's look at, we are introduced to a new character in verse 1 of chapter 3. After these things, what things? Well, Esther's queen. There could be an argument that happened soon after, and Haman was promoted, and then it took 4 years for the story that we are about to enter into to occur. I don't know. But after these things, we're rolling along. Whoever wrote Esther liked to use those words, we know. King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the Agagite, the son of Mattatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all of the officials who were with him. Now, let's meet Haman and talk about him for a minute. His name means magnificent. Interesting when you think of who he goes up against. What's Mordecai mean? Who? Little man. Very good. So little man goes up against magnificent man. I love that. There's a long-term hatred between the Agagites and the Jews. Remember we talked about this with the Benjaminites? We're told Haman the Agagite. Why do we need to know that? Well, it's there, And it's there, so there must be a really good reason to know that Haman is an Agagite. So let's think back to Sunday school lessons of long ago. Flannel graph, the whole thing. Remember Saul? If we had time, I would go back and I would read these passages. If you want to, write those down, go back later. Saul, King Saul, God tells Saul to go and kill the Amalekites. Saul goes, attacks the Amalekites, doesn't kill all of the Amalekites. Who does he not kill? The king named well, shorten it. King Agag. He does not kill King Agag. He also does not kill all the good stuff. All the good stuff, because God says, go and destroy it all. Saul says, well, okay, God, but I'll save the best stuff for sacrifices. I'm going to do you a favor. I'm not going to obey you all the way, but I'm going to rationalize my obedience by saying I'm going to do this for you. Instead of obeying all the way, God didn't need those sacrifices, right? God wanted obedience. So, I just sat there and I was pondering this, and I thought, how many times do we rationalize with God when He wants us to do something, and we'll rationalize and say, okay, I'll do that, but I'm going to do this along with that, help you out a little bit. And that's what Saul was doing. And so he brings back Agag, the king, and he brings back the best of everything. And then, I love this. You need to read this. If you haven't read it in a while, it is great. Because Samuel shows up. And Samuel comes and he goes, I hear sheep. And I hear oxen. Why am I hearing these things? Dead sheep and dead cows don't do anything. And Saul comes in and he goes, well, I went and I did what God told me to do. And then the people decided to bring back the sheep and the oxen. Oh, yeah, they threw the king in there too. Samuel's not happy because he knew what God had said to do. And so Saul then knows that Samuel's not happy. So then Saul's getting a little worried. And then Samuel says, bring me Agag. Now, the fun part of the story is Agag, when they go and get him, he thinks it's over, that, everything's cool, and he's just going to get released because he survived the whole siege. And so, I can't remember how it's worded, but it's worded such that, Agag is like, whew, this is great. Samuel wants to see me. When he gets to Samuel, Samuel looks at him, says the best thing ever. Today, your mother is going to be childless. Now ponder that. What a convoluted way to tell somebody, I'm about to chop you up, which is exactly what he did. He chopped Agag up into pieces. Oh, awful story. I read these things, I think, I just could not have lived back in those days. I can't. But anyway, he chops Agag up into pieces, and the Amalekites / Agagites are forever the enemies of God's people. Forever the enemies of God's people. Now, why in the world whoever wrote Esther had to let us know that Haman was an Agagite? Because it adds a whole depth to the story of why Haman had a problem with Mordecai. See? And if you don't take the time to consider the history of that, you lose part of that depth of that plot that we're going to see develop as we go on. That was story time with Aunt Chris, by the way. Yeah. Thank you. All right. We also know Haman got elevated. Look, he is, we're told that he promoted him, he advanced him, and set his throne above all of the officials who were with him. Now, we know Ahasuerus had 7 very prominent people that surrounded him, right? And we talked about them before. Now, does he still have those 7? Quite possibly, and he just added Haman to it. We don't know. We don't know if one of them died and he replaced him with Haman, but we do know if he did replace him with Haman, he then gave Haman a higher seat because there was no one higher than Haman except the king. That is frightful power right there. Warren Wiersbe actually said, what people do with authority is a test of their character. When he's given power and authority, it tests his character, and we also see how Esther, apparently, when she was given power and authority, tested her character as well. So it's a great contrast between these two. It'd be really neat, just to take two characters and Esther, any two, put them side by side and do this comparison contrast thing, because there's so many underlying threads that run through these characters. But let's keep going. In verse 2, and all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Sounds a little redundant to me. When I would teach writing, I'd say it, get it done. Don't repeat yourself. So I'm looking at this going, okay, didn't bow down or pay. Oh, man, told you I was going to talk fast, and that comes with a price. He didn't bow down or pay homage. If it's there like that, it's not redundant. So what is the difference? So in picking that apart, bowing down obviously is a physical bowing or prostrating someone, yourself in front of someone. A good Jew would do that because a good Jew would honor authority. Not a problem. The problem comes in the paying homage part, because it was a Persian thing that if you were elevated to certain positions, you were almost a deity or considered a deity. And so to pay homage would be, I would bow down, but I would also pretty much worship this person. Apparently, that's what Mordecai had a problem with. Now, we have discussed the fact that they lived a secret Jewish life probably meant they had to compromise on their diet and whatever. We've talked about that. So you look and you see Mordecai, who has been unfaithful to God through the years in certain aspects, but now all of a sudden it seems that, he's taken that, the second commandment very seriously, or first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. He is not going to bow before anything that would consider themselves a god and worship anything but the one true God. And Mordecai may have known that Haman was an Agagite, and we're probably given that information to understand better the reason that Haman acted the way he did more than the way Mordecai acted that way. We'll sort that out in just a minute. But he more likely didn't worship Haman because of his obedience and loyalty to the one true God. And let's keep reading verses 3 and 4. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate. Now, don't get hung up on the king's servants thing. Everybody was a king's servant. Haman was the king's servant, even though he was next in line, in power. So don't get hung up on the word servant to think that Mordecai might have had a, janitorial job. Maybe he did, but don't let that convince you that that's what he had. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, why do you transgress the king's command? And when they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For he had told them that he was a Jew. Look here. So he has a challenge here. And we're told that the king's servants at the gate, they were probably Mordecai's equals and colleagues. So they spoke to him every day. Remember how I said we're talking, how many years did this go on? When did Haman get this job? I don't know. Did he get the job and this happened within the first week of his job? Or did this go for months? Did this go on for 3 or 4 years before, our story develops tonight? I have absolutely no idea. But the kicker here is that every single day he went to work. He dealt with these people who were his colleagues, harassing him about the fact that he would not bow down or pay homage to Haman when Haman would come into the room or walk by or whatever. Then I find it very interesting that we are told he would not listen to them. So don't you know that every day Mordecai got up out of bed, drank his coffee, drove to work, or whatever, he had to determine in his heart, before the dilemma came of them harassing him that day, every single day, he had to decide that he would not listen to them. There is such a lesson there in determining ahead of time how you're going to respond. When we hit the respond, react thing, we're going to hit it again tonight. But he predetermined his response to them. And in this case, his response to them was not to listen. So then, since they couldn't get him to react, see, if somebody, you ever had anybody that's really just pushed at you trying to get you to react? You know, and then you actually give them what they're looking for, you know? Yeah. So they're pushing him to react. He does not react. He responds because he predetermined how he would be every day. They told Haman in order to see if Mordecai's words would stand. What's that mean?
Be afraid.
So, yeah, you can stand and you cannot bow down to the guy until he notices, until he finds out you're not doing that. And then are you going to be that resolute? Now he's got a test, right? Haman knows now that Mordecai is not bowing down to him. And you know what that also tells me? To this point, Haman must not have noticed. So it didn't bother Haman until he was told it needed to bother him. Then when he's told it needs to bother him, it's the only thing he can think about. Who does that remind you of? Back in chapter 1, when the king was so mad, and we talked about those words meaning rage and fury and everything, and then there was something, however it was worded, which meant that he was consumed by that, and that's all that king could think about. Same thing. So now Haman knows. Everybody's bowing down to him except this one person. Oh, and on top of that, the one person that won't bow down to you is a Jew. And he is an Agagite. And so that's why I said probably the reason Mordecai is not bowing down is because he is a Jew loyal to God. The reason it bothers Haman so much is that he is himself an Agagite. This guy's a Jew. And he's not bowing down to me because he's bowing down to that God who told those people to kill all of my people years ago and chopped up our king. So now it's become a very prejudiced thing with Haman. I don't think so much with Mordecai. I think that's more on Haman's side. So let me see. I get ahead of myself. And I told you all kinds of things. Yeah, we're just flying through. All right. Look at verse 5. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, he was filled with fury. Same words. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. Now, here we are again. We have a reaction that then causes an irrational decision, which later he regrets. Well, I'm assuming he regrets. He's dead at the end of the story. That's kind of regretful. Whereas, if you respond, you'll make a rational decision, which is a righteous thing to do, right? Which we talked about probably every week. So once again, rage has caused an issue that is going to end up with regret by the end of the story. I have to have this fan, but it is a blessing and a curse. Now, he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. I kind of got hung up on that. So what in the world does that mean? But then, when you think about it, this isn't a Mordecai issue to him. It's a Jew issue. So that means if one Jew won't bow down to me, All these other ones probably won't either. If I go outside the palace, they're all supposed to do this to me. So it's not a Mordecai problem. It's a Jew problem. So to take care of just Mordecai is not going to take care of the problem. So then he comes up with this, I got to get rid of them all. If they're not going to bow down to me, I don't want them in the kingdom. So I'm going to destroy them. Interesting word, destroy, means to exterminate or annihilate. So he's, I think, exterminate with bugs and pests, which is probably exactly how Haman deemed these people. They were pests. They would not bow down. It's going to destroy them. And we see that word come up at the end of the chapter along with a couple of others we'll talk about. So look here. Haman's revenge. Recognize those two words? The two words that could have driven Mordecai, but they didn't, are the two words that are driving Haman to his irrational decision and his now attempts or goal to annihilate the Jews. Vindication, because the Agagites hated the Jews. And then selfishness, because you're supposed to bow down to me, and you're not bowing down to me, and I want 100% participation. And I'm not going to walk by and have all these people bowing down, and then you think that you're not going to bow down because you're going to worship somebody else instead of me. Selfishness. So it's kind of like the very first Pride and Prejudice out there. Jane Austen wasn't anywhere around. But we have pride and we have prejudice right here on this very slide. But let's look at verse 7. And I put it up here on the screen for you. So we have in the first month, which is the month of Nisan. Now, well, let's read it. In the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is, they cast lots, before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month, till the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Lots to tell you about in this verse just to understand what's going on. First of all, the months that we have are not their months. So when they say, in the first month, not January. Oh, bless your heart. Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't have to wrestle those pages anymore. See, you need to need. Thank you so much. So good. Anyway, their first month is not January. Their 12th month is not December. And I've told you before, their months kind of start in the halves of our months. So their first month would be half of our March and half of our April. So our story is going to involve the first to the 12th month. We have to realize it does go over a year, okay, for us. So that's why my dates will be this way. Anyway, in the 12th year of the king, we already looked at that timeline, they cast Pur. Now, we know Haman is the one that's really mad, and he's concocted this plan. So who in the world is they? He didn't want to do it alone.
I think it's maybe divine.
There you go. The diviners, the astrologers and all. And I'm wondering, this is all hypothesis, but I'm wondering, could it be those 7 other guys that had surrounded themselves with the king that we've already talked about and met? Because they were astrologers. We've talked about them for a couple of weeks. So it kind of makes me wonder if it happened to be them, because it was a mystical, spiritual thing that they were doing here. And that's why Haman did not want to just pick a date and say, all right, I'm going to kill all these Jews and I'm going to do it on my birthday. Or I'm going to kill all these Jews and I'm just going to, close my eyes and, point to a date on the calendar and that's what it's going to be. But Pur, that is the Assyrian word for the word Lot. And I love that because at the end of the book, they have a feast. And the feast is Purim. And it's named for the fact that the lot was cast against them. And they didn't die. And so they named this feast after the lot. And they called it Purim. Now, they, astrologers, whoever they are, cast lots before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month until the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Either way we look at this, the odds are incredible, because Sometimes they had two rocks that they could cast, and there would be maybe an inscription or something, or some kind of engraving on one side and nothing on the other. And so they could cast these lots, and in order for it to be a yes, both lots had to come up with the inscriptions on top. If it was like an inscription and a blank side on the other one, you had to rethrow. It was a no. That could have been the case here, or they may have just had one. Either way, the odds are incredible, because they started casting these lots in the first month. We are in Nisan, March, April, and they cast them either, they said, okay, we're going to pick a month, so we're going to cast the lots. Is it going to be the first month? No. Is it going to be the second month? No. Is it going to be the third month? No. Until they cast it for, is it going to be the 12th month? And they got a heads up. Just think of it in the idea of flipping a coin, heads or tails, right? And heads is yes, tails is no. They could have done it that way and picked the month and then go, okay, now it's the 12th month. All right, is it going to be the first day of the 12th month? No. Is it going to be the second day? No. That would have been faster, but depending on how you read this, they could have done it, okay, January 1st. No. January 2nd. No. And gone all the way through all the months and all of the days until they got to the 13th day of the 12th month, which is what they ended up landing on.
It was men.
Do what?
Yeah.
Yeah. True. So we don't know. Either way, it required a lot of throwing of those lots or lot. I mean, it might have just been one and it was a yes or no, or it might have been two. If it were two, I mean, it's even more. The probabilities are, and I don't do probabilities and statistics. However, I do realize that two increase, the math a whole lot. Anyway, and think about it. So they're like, okay, is it going to be this one? And they cast those lots. No. And it's so cool when you read this verse in Proverbs 16:33, because this is exactly what happened. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. And I mean, of all of those throws, and to not get a yes before it made it 11 months away. And we're told by the time they wrote the edict to the time that the actual attack on the Jews was going to take place was exactly 11 months. That was a lot of flipping of the coin, so to speak, to get a no every time. God gave these people 11 months exactly. So this is the equivalent. Well, let's look. Well, no, we're told the exact date later, so we'll talk about that when we get there. So let's look at verse 8. Then Haman, after they came, figured out the date, Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people. Now look how vague he was. He didn't say, hey, there's Jews in the kingdom. No, certain people. So he was vague from the start, scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different. Are they really? From those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. And tolerate there means to let lie and have rest, or to just even permit it. And I didn't put this up there, but another way to look at it's not to the king's profit. Obviously, they were profiting the king, because we're going to do a little bit of math here in a minute. I know that shocks you, but we are. Anyway, it's not necessarily a profit monetarily. Another way to look at it's not kingly for you to allow people in your kingdom not to keep your laws. So read it that way, and then you realize, okay, he's appealing to his ego. I'm the most powerful king there is. Look at my kingdom. And now you're telling me it's not a kingly thing to have these certain people in my kingdom not obeying the law. He gives Ahasuerus absolutely no idea who these people are and how many we're talking about. But roughly 15 million people. 15 million Jews is what I've read. A certain people. Now, in Ahasuerus' defense, he probably thinks there are a few rogue revolutionaries that he's talking about, And you just need to get rid of them because, these other two several years ago thought they were going to kill me, and we did away with them and probably a few more along the way. So if we got some revolutionaries out here, just get them out of here because they're going to mess everything up. A few revolutionaries is not 15 million people, but that's what we're looking at. Jeremiah 29, 4-7. Remember the very first lesson that we had? We read Jeremiah 29. And we read that is the letter that God gave to Jeremiah to share with the people about their captivity and how they are supposed to behave in their captivity, right? I found something I wanted to read to you about that. It says, the fact that one man, Mordecai, disobeyed one law was exaggerated by Haman into the false accusation that all of the Jews obeyed all of the laws in the land. These verses right here instructed the exiled Jews to behave as good citizens and cooperate with their captors, and the evidence is that they did obey. If the Jews in the Persian Empire had been repeatedly guilty of treason and other crimes, the king would have known about it by now, right? And even if some Jews in a few towns did disobey the king's laws, why should the whole nation of Israel be destroyed for the crimes of a few? So we have a reaction that now has made a very, very illogical decision, right? It doesn't make sense that he would do that. Now, going on, let me put this page down. There we go. If it please, verse 9, if it please the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of the silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they may put it into the king's treasuries. Now, there's no way, probably, at this point, that Haman had that kind of money. His plan, of course, we see by the edict, was to plunder the Jews' belongings. When they killed the Jews, take their stuff. When you take their stuff, we'll cash it in and put it into the king's treasury. He's going to get rich off of my plan. So he's trying to convince the king. Let's see what this looks like. So you have the bribe. He says, I want to give you 10,000 talents of silver. That computes to 12 million ounces of silver. Now, or 375 tons. The bribe amount was what he expected to collect by confiscating the Jews' property. Now, if the Jews really were terrible people, they probably would not have been doing too well. Now, we know they probably didn't have a lot of riches, but if you're talking 15 million people who have a little, still amounts to a lot if you were to collect all of that stuff, right? So just don't think that we're talking a bunch of rich people here. We're just talking a bunch of law-abiding Jews who worked hard and went and made their way while they were in captivity and made something of their lives, and they were about to lose it all, including their life. The estimated yearly revenue of the Persian Empire was 15,000 talents. So the bribe that he was going to offer was 2/3 of the yearly revenue of the whole empire. In current terms, from someone that I read, it looks like this. 420 billion was what that empire was worth in today's terms, approximately, every year. And Haman is saying, if you let me go take care of these people, I'll be able to give you $280 billion. Wow. We know it doesn't take much for you to be bought out. But look at what the king says. This is telling of Haman's character right here. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said, the money is given to you and the people also to do with them as it seems good to you. In other words, I don't need that money. So Haman gets free will to do whatever he wants to with these people. But if you look down further on the edict that he actually sends out, let's see, I think it's end of verse 13. Go about the middle of it. In one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. He left it in there. The king said, you can do it. You don't have to worry about giving me any money. But Haman's seeing, then yeah, guess who then would get it? I'm still going to put it in the edict. I'm still going to say, kill these people, take their stuff. The king doesn't want it. I know somebody who could use that. And he's looking at $280 billion to do this. And, I mean, I just can't imagine I was going to say the character that he was, but he didn't have any, when you look at that. And you notice the king asks no questions. He just gives the ring over and says, just go ahead and do that. He didn't ask who those people were or whatever. And then look, he gives his ring too. And look at, we know who this guy is. We've been talking about him the whole chapter. But why do we get this? Well, he says he gives a signet ring to Haman, the Agagite, the son of Magatha, the enemy of the Jews. Quite telling right there. So we know it's not just a personal vendetta between Haman and Mordecai because he was embarrassed because everybody else bowed down in the gate that day and Haman didn't do it. And why? I mean, Haman did not obey that order. And when you don't obey that order, all Haman had to do... No, did I say Mordecai? Mordecai didn't obey the order. I don't know what I said. Mordecai didn't obey the order. Haman could have taken that straight to the king and said, I've got somebody in your gate that's not bowing down. The king would have taken care of it. It would have been over. But instead, the reaction that he has now is affecting 15 million people instead of just one. So let's look at verses 12 to 14. We're almost done. If I can find it, there we go. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month. Now, let me just tell you something. Since these months fall weirdly to our calendar, it wouldn't be January the 13th. And actually, I told you like it was March to April is the first month. February to March is the 12th month. So we are actually looking at about April the 7th to March the 7th. That's how much time these people have to put it in our calendar, even though that's not their calendar. So when they say the 13th day, apparently, don't ask me why, it's a whole calendar thing. But it computes to our April 7th to March 7th. But it's their Nisan 7th to Adar. 13th to Adar 13th. I better stop while I'm ahead. All right, so they were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps. Now we have a hierarchy here we're going to read. The king's satraps, and to the governors over all the provinces, and to the officials of all the people, to every province in his own script, and every people in their own language. We've seen that before, right? Because when the whole thing about all the women have to respect their husbands, that went out after the Vashti incident, we had that same explanation how it went into their own languages and whatnot. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is in the month Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation to all the peoples to be ready for that day. So here's what that edict says. You're going to destroy, you're going to kill, and you're going to annihilate all Jews. Well, do you think he needed to say it 3 times? Does that not tell you something right there? Just for the sake, destroy, we already talked about. That's that exterminate or to annihilate. Kill, murder, slay. And then here we have annihilate that's used in the ESV. But that word originally means to cause to vanish or disappear. That to me is the most telling word. He wanted them gone forever. Memory of them wiped off the face of the earth forever. That's a very seriously strong word. But to put all 3 of those in his edict tells you the rage and anger and hatred this man had. So they're supposed to be young and old, women and children. It didn't matter. If they were a Jew, they were to be killed. In one day. 15 million people were to be killed in one day. And the 13th of Adar in 473. You're to plunder all of their goods and then issue this document as a decree in every province. And that's interesting. That's a little foreshadowing because that is actually the documents that's going to make it into Esther's hands. Maybe next week. I think that might happen next week, but I'm not sure. Verse 15, and we're done. The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king. Let me ask you something. We had 11 months to deal with this. So why did the king, or did he, order that these couriers go out in a hurry? Why did this have to go out so fast? I don't know. Well, they had a plan how they were going to kill them all. Yeah. Or, I mean, he was excited, couldn't wait to get it underway. How do you think? What? So he wouldn't change? Well, he can't. He couldn't change his mind on this one because it was sealed.
When did it go? When did it go out? If they're saying you're going to do it on this day, where they let get invitations in the mail.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
True. And you think about how far-reaching it is, and it had to all be carried on foot. Did some people there in Shushan had 11 months to plan? Those in northeast Persian Empire may have had, 6 months to plan? I don't know. It's just, those are things I just throw out and chew on. And I like for y'all to chew on them too. How do you think Haman felt as he was or whoever was throwing those lots? And it ended up being 11 months away.
He had a lot of time to get mad.
Well, he had a lot of to get mad and stay mad. Frustrated because he would have done it yesterday if he could have, maybe. That's just something kind of interesting to think about too. Was he happy because then he's got 11 months of these people being afraid of him? He's an evil man. But was he mad because he wanted it done already? I don't know. But that's how my mind works. I just ask a lot of questions. But let's keep going and finishing up. So they went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel, and the king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. Oh, these poor people. The citizens of the empire knew Jewish people who lived among them, and they knew that they were good citizens who caused no trouble. So they were very confused that a decree would come forth declaring that these Jews were dangerous enemies. So they were probably friends. They probably had Jewish friends that lived next door. Who knows? But then all of a sudden, you're told that, hey, in 11 months, you're going to have to kill these friends that live next door in one day and take all their stuff. So yeah, confused or perplexed is another word that means everybody's just almost, and what a way to end, because you kind of get left with, this is like, if this were one of those serial TV shows, this would be the perfect stopping point, because all these people, you see Haman and the king, and they're over having drinks in the palace, calm as everything. King has no idea what just happened, which is a horrible leader right there. Haman knows exactly what he's done, and he's pretty pleased with himself. Plus, he knows he's getting, $280 billion in his back pocket as a result of it. So they're, popping down some drinks over in the palace while everybody else is completely torn apart. Oh, what a way to end.